my strawberry right there. Everything Kenji told you is true. With the exception of, he didn't mention that I've been bartending for almost 20 years, but he's not supposed to tell you that because it makes me seem old. It is such a wonderful honor to be here, and yes, we're going to talk about being a hybrid bartender, but it's very specifically about my background in flowers and plants, in fruits, botanicals, wine, cooking, viticulture, vinification, fermentation, distillation. We're going to do it all. So, the ingredient anatomy for the hybrid bartender is essentially it's kind of an abstract concept, but it's quite personal. So, as you're going through this today, and as I'm leading this, just in the same way as I've done my smaller sessions in the room just next to the star stage, I'd like for you to make just a couple of little notes and a couple of little things about how you feel about this personally. And then at the end of this, hopefully you will have come out with a very new way of looking at making cocktails and presenting in your own markets, in your own bars. So, the focus. I feel like I'm in like a focus group. Hello, my name is Lauren and I am a hybrid bartender. Why? I'm a hybrid bartender because I study every single aspect of food, beverage, flavor, and sensory perception. And what I wanted to do was take you through a little bit about my creative process, how plants actually inspire every single thing that I do, from making a cocktail to how I grow the food that I eat, to when I travel. Most of the things that I like to do when I travel is I expect that the bartenders and the people that I visit, they will take me to restaurants as well as bars, but I also want to go to markets. I also want to go to farms. And then I just sort of leave that part blank on my customs form when I come back to Canada. So, I'm a sommelier, I'm a cook, I have a background in understanding farming and understanding agriculture. Where we make Bittered Sling Bitters, which is 6 hours north of Vancouver in Canada, is an incredible area called the Okanagan Valley, which is our wine-making region. All of our bitters that we make have a 100% ugly fruit. We call it ugly fruit now. It used to be just called recycled fruit. Spirit as the base, and I've been part of the process of how we source, pick, harvest, and process a lot of the fruit we use in the base of our bitters. So, while my background is as a sommelier, as a cook, as a bartender, I studied cultural studies, so this would be international relations, peace and conflict studies. I've studied about plants, food science, botany. You might find similarities in your own story. And at the end, again, we'll see how you can interpret everything that we've talked about. The reason why I'm focusing on the strawberry is because the strawberry is a fairly common, historically significant individual plant, and it is available all year round, everywhere in the world, and that's not necessarily a good thing. The aim of this is to take the strawberry as sort of our example and to show you how, whether in season or off season, you can either make it taste better or you can help improve it to make sure the strawberry tastes more like a strawberry. But keep in mind that you can use this for any plant, whether it's a pineapple, whether it's a cacao bean, whether it's a watermelon, it's a piece of bok choy, whatever it might be, a plant is a plant is a plant, right? So, the formula. We're kicking it old school. You know why? Because scientists love scientific process, but we are creative directors. We are the creatives. We are, I'm sure everyone in here has probably heard of Mad Men, the show. We are the Don Drapers, but we don't disappear for 3 weeks on end without telling anybody. It's our job to come up with creative concept. So for us, while we might use science and scientific process to help us, determine how we like to give the information, whether it's in a menu, a cocktail, research paper, whatever it might be, for us, we are very visual. We like to smell, we like to taste, we like to look at things, we like to touch texture, and we like to hear things. So even though, when you take the example of a piece of fruit, you might not be able to hear anything, but when you bite into a piece of fruit, you taste juiciness. I taste juiciness, I hear juiciness, I feel juiciness. So how do we take something that's beautifully in season, and make it perfect? Well, to kick it old school, our formula is the W5 plus how. The who, what, where, when, why, and how. In order to fully understand how we can make an exceptional final product, we have to go through this process and answer those 6 questions. So we're going to use a strawberry as our example. Okay? You with me so far? You can say yes. Okay. Why plants? You know, earlier, at the beginning of this, I mentioned that the perfect piece of fruit is something that we love to explore in a sensory perception with taste, touch, smell, feel. But also, plants are a very important thing. Harold McGee, who's is a well-renowned food scientist, and I've had a wonderful honor to meet him and pick his brain about a couple of different things a few years ago. I have 4 volumes of his singular book, which is On Food and Cooking, The Science and Lore of the Kitchen. If you watch any of his lectures, he does have a very emotional response when it comes to fruit. Cooking is, in essence, the human ingenuity of recreating the deliciousness of what plants have been doing for millions of years. That is 100% true. If you take that perfect piece of strawberry, that perfect piece of peach, the perfect grape, the perfect thing when it's in season, and when we're talking about strawberries, that could be like 3 weeks of the year for those really perfect ones, not the ones that are grown in pesticide-filled fields that are where the soil has been destroyed of all nutrients and vitamins. But you bite into this piece of fruit, and it's perfect in sugar, it's perfect in acidity, it's perfect in texture, it's perfect in color, and again, if you can hear juiciness, which I can, it's perfect in its tonality as well. So we reflect back on this perfect bite. So if chefs and cooking have been trying to recreate the perfect balance and composition of a piece of fruit, then what are we doing as bartenders? We're aiming to do the same thing, right? At the end of the day, a cocktail that we come up with, a garnish, a serve, a story, everything requires balance. So of course, that piece of fruit can help you lead towards balance in the same way that chefs utilize cooking techniques. If you've ever enjoyed, If you've ever enjoyed learning about plants, if you've ever enjoyed learning about the history of human civilization, then certainly this will be part of your learning. We say why plants, and we answer that question because that's life. Plant domestication only started really 10,000 years ago, and it would have been less of these hunter-gatherers running around and gathering things on a day-to-day basis, but having fewer people producing more food for more people. This is how we created communities. Civilization itself was built on the fact that we could feed each other, that we could spend time together. It takes a little bit of energy away just from the nuclear family. You end up focusing on a wide range of people. You start to care about the people that you might have something in common with that might not come directly from your family. This would also lead to more of a predictability in food production, which again increases the population density. This is like the only science that I ever talk about, and again, it's complemented with a really cool picture. I mean, if anyone in here has ever gardened, has ever planted something, has ever grown something, touched soil with your hands, it's a pretty incredible emotional feeling. Tool production, travel, trade, communications, everything kind of stems from this one moment as an agricultural revolution. So the domestication of plants, we had cereal crops around 9,000 before our Common Era. Wheat mostly in the Fertile Crescent. We talk a lot about the Fertile Crescent in the last 2 days in my other sessions, because it's important, especially when you're talking about distillation of wheat, and we're talking about distillation of barley, we're talking whiskey, neutral grain spirits, vodkas, gins, whatever it might be. It's important to actually understand where these crops come from and why we started working with them. The Middle East and Fertile Crescent followed barley, and then rice in Southeast Asia, corn, which is now the most widely planted crop in the world, and we all know that. We know the good stories about corn, and we know the bad stories about corn. The good story about corn that I like is it's able to feed the world. Wheat covers more of the Earth's surface than any other crop, although corn is more resilient, requires less energy, provides more carbohydrates to feed the planet. Now, let's talk about the strawberry. Would you believe this is a strawberry field? This is really beautiful. So the ingenuity in farming isn't just about planting row upon row, but this is in Thailand. So in Southeast Asia, I'm sure you've seen like a bird's eye view of, say, like a rice paddy, you know, where they're climbing up sort of what looks like steps. You see that in certain parts of the world where they make exceptional wines grown on very steep slopes. Again, you see the vines are sort of planted in a very specific way. This is for a variety of reasons that we'll get to in a few minutes, but the domestication of the strawberries, we know it today, and it's from this type of field, because it doesn't originate in Thailand. It's perfectly red, it's shiny, it's resilient, and available 24/7, and is a result of hybrid development that happened 300 years ago. So the Mediterranean natives, again, before our common era, spoke of fruits like the strawberry. We medicated with the leaf. We talked through literature as being aromatic on the nose. It was a very interesting flavor. It had like a really nice color, but they were super unproductive and unpredictable because they only grew 3 weeks of the year. So you end up removing strawberries from your zeitgeist. You just don't care about them anymore because they're just not around to make you happy for long enough. The fraise de bois, which is the woodland strawberry, is a great indigenous example. Although small and low yield, it tastes like a complex peak season strawberry. And our goal is to be able to take something like a strawberry that we know we can get 24/7, and think about that from like a pineapple, a plum, something from your country or your community where you know that you can get something all year round. Does it ever concern you that you can walk into a grocery store and get strawberries every single day? So our goal is to make all strawberries taste like that. That is the wild strawberry, the woodland strawberry, the fraise de bois. And I love this because they're packed with flavor. They have a very limited growing season, but this is what we wait for. For me, I don't bother eating other strawberries. I will wait and I'll hold out until the 3 weeks of the year when that one particular wild strawberry is available, and then I'll eat everything. I'll buy everything and I will eat everything. I won't even make anything with them. I just eat them all. So I thought, if that flavor of that beautiful strawberry can be translated, perhaps using a couple of tactics from the sommelier world, from the wine world, from viticulture, from food science, from bartending, from cooking, could we not try and take those strawberries that taste like nothing and be able to make them into something extraordinary for the rest of the year when we don't have them? So similar to what I was mentioning earlier, this is where you can see it just on the globe. So we have our original strawberries, the woodland strawberries and the wild strawberries, the Fragaria moscata and the Fragaria vesca, which come from Northern Europe and the Mediterranean. And then we have our hybrid. The hybrid that we eat now that is available 24/7 is available from the crossbreeding of these two other strains of strawberry, the Fragaria virginiana and the Fragaria chileonensis. So in other parts of the world, we see strawberries, and they're everywhere. And you see them in daiquiris, you see them in weird food groups, you see like the standard salad on everyone's menu when you go to an international restaurant anywhere in the world. It has goat cheese, it has beets, and it has strawberries. So this hybrid is called Fragaria ananas. And what is ingredient anatomy? So the most important thing is to understand that things are very important based on how you perceive them. And the only way that you can know what to do with ingredients, take the strawberry aside. Perhaps it's a different type of ingredient, a different plant that inspires you, a different piece of fruit that you love. Maybe you hate strawberries and you're holding out for peach season. Maybe you are obsessed with rice and you only want very specific rice, and you care not about strawberries and you care not about wheat. The ingredient anatomy will help us to determine exactly what to do and when to do it. So the horticulturalist in you might say, learn the parts, origin, and terroir. This is super important because if you have any understanding of the wine world, this is what you learn in the wine world. You don't have to be a horticulturalist. You don't have to be a botanist. This is an important part of what we learn when we learn about wine. When you are a distiller or you're a blender or you're in the culinary arts, these are the things that you learn. You learn about the root. The root of the plant will transfer the nutrients through the soil, transfer it into the plant. The seed will provide new life for a new plant. The flower provides the opportunity for pollination for either bees or the wind to end up replanting a lot of these plants elsewhere from the original site. The fruit is essentially the protection of the seeds. Most of the seeds are inside this fruit. The fruit can be replanted unless you're as arrogant as the strawberry and you wear your seeds on the front. The leaves will continue to build the plant structure and help to give flavor. The location is very important. This is all part of terroir. We're now talking about conditions. So the terroir of a plant is very important. So we use the comparison of the strawberry against the grape. The location, where in the world it comes from, how much sun, how much water, these are all things to start to consider. So the chef and the sommelier say, learn the aroma, the flavor, the color, and the texture. This is your experiment. It's your experiment when we're working with a strawberry. But again, replace it with any botanical or any piece of fruit that you like. Learn what the raw strawberry tastes like, smells like, looks like. Make notes. Carry on to the next one. Cooked strawberry, frozen strawberry, poached, in season, off season boxed strawberry, dehydrate it, see how you feel. Muddled strawberry, juiced. Sensory perceptions originate from a combination of sweetness, texture, and aroma. And this is a very basic principle in winemaking, in cooking, and it should be in bartending. So who's in charge after all this? I don't know. To be honest, I think everybody has something to bring to the bartending world. Everyone has something to bring to plants. Everyone has something to bring to cooking, to winemaking. It's all very personal. We have a tradition and we have a formula, but at the end of the day, a bartender can contribute something that a cook cannot. A sommelier can contribute something that a farmer cannot. So I think this is part of the hybrid bartending formula, is being able to study and learn as much as you can from a lot of these other disciplines to bring them together to make you stronger. So a lot of what we taste is transferred through our nose. 90% of our flavor on our palate comes from our nose. So when you have a cold and you can't smell anything, it's really quite awful because there's no point eating anything really quite delicious that's going to blow your mind because you can't taste it anyway. In my botanical session yesterday in the business of flavor, we do just that. You don't taste anything in that session. I'm doing another one today where we go through each individual botanical and we try and identify the tasting notes on the nose and trying to explain to somebody what the flavor of lavender is without actually tasting it and without saying that it smells floral. Lavender has nutmeg, it has spice, it has green cardamom. Making those notes help you to boost the flavor of lavender in a direction that perhaps you hadn't considered before. Doing the same thing with a piece of fruit, like a strawberry, is perfect. Make notes of everything. We don't mean for everything to become a lab report, but if the scientific process has taught us anything, is that making notes is very important. As you keep going through, you practice your trial and error, you will always circle back to see what you've done before. It's the same thing if you're powerlifting or you're doing weight training or things like that. You make notes of all your reps, your sets, and your weights, and then you go back to make sure you know where you've been so you can move forward. So, the tasting notes of a standard strawberry. I would say that this is the tasting note of an in-season wild strawberry, what I wish the rest of the strawberries of the world tasted like, and this, for me, becomes my personal starting point on how I will bring other elements and flavors in to boost the flavor of that strawberry. So, we have rose, we have hibiscus, we have almond, and we do have strawberry, because strawberry has a tasting note in itself. All of these elements, I try and figure out how I can exploit the other ingredients that arise from this family and try and infuse them into what I'm making with the strawberry. Next, we have our tasting notes. These are the standard tasting notes for the perfect strawberry. We have a pineapple-y kind of nose, so pineapple and strawberry, and also a very specific apple, have all the same tasting note. And maybe it would be difficult to see that chemical compound on paper and understand the relationship, but if you eat that exact piece of pineapple, a perfectly in-season strawberry, and a really perfect piece of apple, they will all have a lot of commonalities and help to inspire strawberries to go in different directions. We have the spiciness coming from the clove, which is quite perfumey. We have this creamy, wonderful caramel, burnt sugar flavor on the palate. We have Concord grapes. Now these are different than all the other grapes. These are tannic, they're juicy, and they're super black, spicy flavor, black fruit flavor. Now what I love about processing the plant is that you can do whatever you want. As long as you understand how to use the technique that you're using, and you practice on yourself and your friends first, before you actually serve this in a bar, you can ferment it. You can pickle it. You can use temperature, either cold or hot, in a variety of different ways. You can cure it, and curing either with salt or sugar. You can infuse it, dehydrate it, or use it fresh. Or maybe you can do all of those things. These are not just things that I've posted as actual techniques that other people use. These are the techniques that I use. So on one hand, we have our fermentation on our top left. We have the bacteria and yeast compounds. Those are two different things. On one hand, you could go in sort of like the kefir kombucha direction. You could go in the vinegar direction. You could go in the winemaking direction. We know that any fruit whose juice is fermented and then distilled starts as a wine and becomes a brandy. In this case, it's strawberries, so we call it fraise. That is the actual name. We have our sweet and sour. I call this like the Indian pickle on one hand, because the Indian pickle has a very different flavor. It tastes like a cross between preserved lemons and peels, and it's also quite sour and a little bit of sweetness, but it's sour and salty. Now, doing that type of pickle, by comparison to, say, the quick pickle, now the quick pickle is something you can do within 24 hours. It keeps the vegetable or the fruit quite crunchy. Or you can do something that is more of a à la minute in an ISI charger with nitrous oxide, with all of the flavors that you like, and your strawberries or whatever your ingredient is. Your sweet pickles, this is like the bread and butter pickles. I was wondering, I'm not going to blend anything. It's like a really nice ornament, though. So the sweet pickles, the bread and butter pickles, when you make something that is pickled, it doesn't have to be sour. It just needs to be balanced. You can make something pickled onto the sweeter side by using 75% sugar and 25% salt. That's super easy. It's the same way that we make salted rims. So let's just say, as an example, you're going to go downwards to your dehydrate, and you're going to dry out these strawberries, or whatever your ingredient is, and then you're going to blitz them into a powder, and you add them to a concentration of 75% sugar, 25% salt. That makes a pretty banging rim for something, a powder for something. This brings out flavor. We use sugar in the bartending world as the same way as the chef uses salt to bring out flavor. Okay, and then we move on. So temperature. I think using liquid nitrogen is it's an effective tool, but I think that you need training in it. I don't think bartenders should be able to just buy a dewar of liquid nitrogen. I think you should be able to do a course first and understand how to use it, because it is the opposite of a deep fryer into the sub-zero category. So when you're dealing with temperatures that are minus 500 Fahrenheit, I mean, it's pretty serious stuff. Sous vide, super easy. We can do pickles in the sous vide, we can do preserved strawberries, we can do syrups, we can do all kinds of things because the temperature stays the same. It keeps things very consistent. So as you're slow cooking, if you imagine a sous vide is kind of like braising in the cocktail world. You can use that in a little slow and low without adding any color or caramelization. We have pasteurization, we have our syrups. So syrup, some people will cook the fruit or cook the ingredients in order to make the syrup. For me, I like to go down to fresh, I like to juice, whatever that ingredient might be, and then I like to make a syrup from that using the component of the fruit juice that I have just juiced and use that as the liquid component in my syrup to match with the equal part of sugar. Sometimes you can't juice things, like peaches are very, very difficult to juice because they have a lot of pectin. Pectin is the natural thickening agent, which strawberries tend to have very, very little of. So when you're making preserves with strawberries, you need to add pectin, otherwise it will not gel. It will continue to be like a loose preserves and it's still delicious, but you'll need to add the pectin. Whereas for peaches, if you were going to juice them, I would say maybe don't juice them. I would probably cook them and do the syrup in the above part with the temperature. Now, moving on, we have fresh. When they're fresh and you use them whole, I mean, that's epic. Those are the 3 weeks of the year when every single fruit is available in peach season, in rhubarb season, cherry season, strawberry, blueberry, boysenberry, whatever it might be. Those 3 weeks, being able to plan ahead of time that when that 3 weeks is here, that you're only serving fresh, you know, and a combination of maybe temperature and fresh. So when we dehydrate, you can either dehydrate with sugar and with salt or without. When you dehydrate the fruit, just as it is, when you slice it into small pieces and you stick it in the dehydrator, it will come out just like that. It will come out just as little strawberry chips. Fine, no problem there. You can add that to a tea blend, you can blitz it to a powder. Next, we go to the cure. Let's say you want to dehydrate and cure with sugar, with oleosaccharum. You can either make an oleosaccharum, so one of my favorite ways that eventually becomes a syrup and a sweet cured fruit is by taking a bag and loading it with like fresh strawberries, whether they're cut or whole, adding the sugar that you need with a small portion of salt, maybe a little citric acid, depending on the flavor of the strawberries. And from there, I'll just seal it up and just leave it on the counter. Just leave it on the counter. The sugar and salt will naturally start to pull out the liquid just in the same way as it does when you cure a fish or you cure a piece of meat. It's the same understanding, but because strawberries are 90% water, it's going to eventually pull out this beautifully red, unaffected, incredible color that you wouldn't have been able to achieve any other way, which is pretty amazing. I think salt cures are really cool. Again, I would invert the recipe that I gave you. I say that the cure should be 75% sugar and 25% salt when you're making like, you know, something that you want it to be salty with just like a little hint of balance from the sugar. I would flip that around, and it's sort of the same cure that we would use on fish. This would be 75% salt, 25% sugar, and from there, you can do all manner of things with it. If you want to do preserved lemon style, okay, we've all had preserved lemons, which are very delicious. You can do preserved strawberries and use that for something really interesting. We've also made kimchi. We've made strawberry and almond kimchi. And it was also really interesting because the moisture content was so high. So we had to actually drain it to make sure a lot of the liquid could come out. And that liquid was a fermented chili strawberry bath that we ended up using for a number of other things. So if you start to think about how you would use byproduct of certain ingredients, when someone says, well, strawberry can only be used fresh, and strawberry can only be used in a blender, or strawberry can only be used to infuse into a vodka, or strawberry can only be used this way or that way. It's so untrue. We just have to remove the preconceptions of what we've always used strawberries for in baking, sweet applications, pies, all kinds of things, and be able to treat it like a savory element. Finally, we have our infusion. Now, I just mentioned about strawberry vodka. Listen, I think strawberries infused into anything is quite delicious, but I think some of my favorites are when we infuse strawberries into things that have something in common with the strawberry aromas and perhaps the other family groups. I think it's really cool when you start to think of things in a better moment that you can start to combine a lot of these flavors and characters together to give you something brand new and super interesting. So we have our tisane. Tisane is hot water with a botanical. Tea is hot water with tea leaves. We call everything tea, even though it's not tea. I think my favorite example is chai. Chai means tea, and then people order chai tea, and then you're like, you want a tea? So it doesn't make any sense. So a tisane, which is awesome, which you can use with either fresh or with dried, and then you can start to complement it with other ingredients that perhaps go together, like hibiscus. like roses, like pineapple, like black pepper, like cardamom, black cardamom, cinnamon, so many different things. Other fruits, perhaps other berries. Making bitters, I think making bitters and adding sugar is totally stupid. So what I do think is by making bitters and using a fruit component to add sweetness and balance to your bitter blend makes more sense, right? You should have the ultimate control over adding sweetness and sugar to your cocktail, and it shouldn't be the job of the person making the bitters to already be sweetening an ingredient for you to use that you think is supposed to be bitter, right? So by adding strawberries, whether dry or fresh, to add not only a flavor character component, but it also adds a sweetness from the fruit itself. Gives you a really interesting balance. And tinctures, of course. I love tinctures. We take one ingredient, or we take 5 ingredients, and then you start blending them together. Why not investigate one of the 360 different flavor compounds of a strawberry, and what, based on your perception, from tasting it, from smelling it, from working with it, try and figure out other things on the nose that quite inspire you to pair with strawberry. And then try making tinctures from those things and combining them together. Or making tisanes or tea-style hot things, hot infusions, and bringing them together. Liqueurs are easy. We start with either a tincture or like an infusion with multiple ingredients, or perhaps a bitters, and then we combine it, maybe not with sugar syrup, maybe we combine it with your freshly pressed strawberry juice syrup. I think that would be pretty amazing. And then just keep the ABV above 30%. So then you have your appropriate service. Now we're still in our W5 formula here, you know? We're still on what and how, because it takes forever. Those are the things that take the longest. We told you why, we told you when, we tell you where, and now it's about the appropriate service. We have a sour. We have the Daisy, we have the Collins, the Royale, so topped with sparkling wine, an old-fashioned style, a 2-1-2, which is 2 parts spirit, 1 part syrup, 2 parts bitters. And then we have the punch, we have the toddy, the cobbler, and the step ladder, which is sort of like the Martinez, sort of amplified moving forward. So I think trying to find the right service element and the right cocktail design, the right classic to be able to complement the tasting notes that you've already written down, how you want to use a strawberry, you've figured out already how to prep it, right? So you do your prep, you do your planning, you plan your menus, you plan your mise en place, you train your staff how to do all of these things, and then you complement it with a really killer cocktail. Then you can add in all the service pieces. The cocktail is balanced, you've got your beautiful glasses, you've got your menu, you have everything. This is probably like the final thing. Then we want to think across other fruit and genus families. Why not think about, you don't have to look at the ones that are on the screen. I mean, these are things that I'm thinking about. This is all about, it's not all about me, it's all about my process. But you might look at this and think, I'm not really a fan of the prunus family. I'm allergic to stone fruits. I can't have cherries, peaches, nectarines, almonds. So you might want to go in a different direction. Saccharum at the top, this is the family of wild grasses that have the sucrose component, which would be saccharum, sugarcane. Next one down, we just talked about the prunus. And malus, which is the apple and small seed family, which also has a little bit of cyanide in the seeds, just in the same way as cherries and peaches. So when you start looking across these families, why not go a step further? Discover more about the pineapple, discover more about ginger, discover more about, let's say, grapes. I mean, grapes is a pretty obvious thing. If you end up discovering a little bit more about a cacao bean or about a coffee bean, and from where in the world, and using this whole formula from terroir to where to how to when to why, I think it's pretty awesome for me, because this is how I operate. So we recap the formula. We recap the formula with our W5 and our how. You have to do research. Again, I can't stress that enough. I have a Moleskine book, and I fill one of these out every 3 months because I do research on every single product and every single ingredient that I ever not only serve to a person, but I serve myself. I like knowing about things. That's what makes this whole hybrid bartender principle and ideal make sense. Sensory perception, using all the five senses, of course. We're talking about you can look at it, you can touch it, you can smell it, you can hear it, you can taste it. And tasting notes. Before you put anything in your mouth, you have to confirm that your nose has given you as much information as possible. I also like doing this with other people. I love doing tasting note examinations with like maybe 2 or 3 people because everyone's sensory perception is different. Aromatic compounds and flavors, it's exactly what we went over. It's like, what should it taste like? That's the tasting note of the family. But what does it actually taste like? Techniques and processing, appropriate service and vessels, and repeat from the top with new ingredient. Now, you guys, I am so on time. I even have 2 minutes to spare. So the future of hybrid bartending is where we've been and where we're going. And of course, that's me just flying into the future. No, I'm just kidding. I think it's a really incredible thing to be able to use every single element of expertise that you have in your wheelhouse. Because for you, it might be that you're an aspiring blacksmith. Or if you're Kenji, maybe you're an aspiring deep sea diver going down as far as you can without getting the bends. You complement every single part of your professional persona with everything you've got. If you're interested in being a yoga teacher, I'm sure you can probably figure out how to incorporate that in here. It's part of storytelling, it's part of character building, it's part of flavor building, and that's what we do as bartenders. We are the creative directors. So, I hope that you become hybrid bartenders. I'm sure all of you are already. It's very, very difficult to describe to people what I do for a living because I am that. I am a hybrid bartender. You know, having bartended for 20 years, you end up picking up a lot of bits along the way. I will always be a bartender, but I like to complement it with other things that make me happy. So, thank you so much.